Monday, June 1st. This is news and commentary from America's Heartland. You're watching Heartlander News. Well, hey there, and welcome in to another edition of Heartlander News. I'm Chris Stigall. Today's scandals. The Democrats have a real issue and a real problem up there in Maine. They want rid of Susan Collins of Maine. But the guy they have, now it kind of depends on which poll you're looking at. In fact, I'm seeing one this morning of Maine residents, 1,300 Maine residents right now, and they give Plattner the lead by something like 6 points. But again, that's just residents. That's not even registered voters. That's just people who live in Maine. Polling between Plattner and Collins is actually much tighter when you're looking at likely voters among other polls, but neither here nor there. The fact of the matter is this Plattner guy, Nazi tattoo on the chest, he eventually had covered up. He claims, well, it was a Nazi tattoo, but I was drunk when I got it. Of course, he let a Nazi tattoo rest on his chest for years, 12 years, I think, before he decided to cover it up. So, okay, you went out, you got a drunken Nazi tattoo, and you waited 12 years to cover it. Right, here again. The revolution depends on deceit and conformity. So Plattner's having more problems, though. It's more than just that. Turns out he's quite a carouser. Turns out he's had his fair share of boozy, sex-fueled issues as well, and it's all coming home to roost, and Democrats are now trying to figure out exactly how to position themselves here. They want rid of Susan Collins, but they know this guy is getting to a place where he's almost impossible to defend. And so they tried their best over the weekend. Give me 194 as Margaret Brennan talks with one of the biggest, loathsome, makes your skin crawl kind of gaslighters, Chris Murphy, Democrat from Connecticut, as he's asked about Graham Plattner. Take a listen.
To that point about spirit and character, the campaign for Graham Plattner confirmed to CBS on Saturday that the Maine Senate candidate had sent sexually explicit texts to women other than his wife. This is in addition to other past controversies. Does he pass the character test?
Yeah, I mean, I have not followed this story as closely as others have, but I mean, Graham Plattner is somebody that served our country. He served his community. He's also made mistakes, and he has admitted that. Character also involves standing up to people who are bankrupting and corrupting this country. And this race is going to be a contrast between somebody that has put his life on the line for this country against somebody that is literally empowering the moral hollowing out of our nation from the White House. So he certainly admitted that he has made mistakes, but I think this is going to be a pretty clear contrast in Maine between somebody who has spent his life protecting us versus somebody who seems to be protecting Donald Trump's corruption.
Aha. I see. You get that? So no matter what Graham Plattner has done, no matter how objectionable his character, no matter how questionable his decision-making, the most important thing is he opposes Donald Trump. And really, isn't that what we all ought to be focused on? Who cares what he's done? You see, when you lower the bar to that degree, is there any depths to which you won't sink to win elected office, just to win? Again, ignore everything you know, because the revolution depends on deceit and conformity. Ignore everything you know about this man. The Wall Street Journal has the details on Plattner. Days after he announced his Maine Senate bid, his wife informed the campaign about a potential political problem she'd previously discovered on his phone. Sexually explicit texts with several women. Now, here again, folks, I'm not suggesting that anybody has a spotless, blemish-free, sinless life. None of us do. But it's transparency, it's judgment, it's repeated errors. You know, it's one thing if you make a mistake, do you correct it? Do you learn? Do you grow? When you see a series of mistakes, it's very Hunter Biden-esque in my mind, one mistake versus, guns and dumpsters and crack pipes and rental cars and stolen identification and bagging money around the globe. And, to say Hunter's troubled and he's had his troubles, well, or is he an organized criminal? Similarly here, Amy Gertner, who married Plattner in 2023, told the campaign about messages she'd found earlier in their marriage in the spring of 2025. In late August, as some aides were conducting Oppo research on their own candidate, Gertner disclosed the text to a campaign aide to make sure they didn't pose a risk to her husband's nascent campaign. The campaign had been preparing for a major rally over Labor Day weekend with Bernie Sanders. Aides ultimately decided the texts were a private matter that was being handled by the couple in marriage counseling, so the rally proceeded as planned with thousands in attendance. In a statement provided by Plattner's campaign, "We did the hard work marriage requires, blah, blah, blah. I know who Graham is," says the wife. "I know the man I married, blah, blah, blah." The previously unreported deliberations last year over sexually explicit texts discovered on Plattner's phone come as the veteran has exploded onto the national political scene, kindling Democrat hopes that they can unseat Susan Collins. So this is the Maine version of Texas's James Tallarico. Well, that was then and this is now. Okay, but you did it. You said it repeatedly. Yeah, well, in hindsight, So now they're running to defeat Donald Trump. They didn't seem to have these come to Jesus epiphanies beforehand, only now that they've become declared candidates. What's their record of coming forward to say, "I've made mistakes, I said boneheaded things, I shouldn't have behaved the way I did"? What's their record of that? None. Where have they said it prior to running for office? They haven't. Because the revolution depends on deceit and conformity, folks. Revelations about Plattner's past have provided fodder for Republicans and stirred debate within the Democrat Party about his character and judgment. The Democrats continued to be asked about this all weekend long. Cory Booker there in New Jersey, where again, the gaslighting on the riots outside the ICE facilities, all from outside groups shipped in to Cory Booker's state. So Cory himself, a known gaslighter, he knows the gaslighting game. Doesn't seem like he's willing to go as far as joining in with the Nazi tattoo oversexed Graham Plattner. Take a listen to this.
Let me ask you, do you have concerns with the weight of all these controversies that it may jeopardize Democratic hopes to get that Senate seat in Maine?
Yeah, I have concerns. That guy has questions to answer, and that's what campaigns are for.
Yeah, I have concerns. He is. And then Andy Kim, also of New Jersey. Old Andy is asked about this, the Democrat in 96, 196 here. What do you think about Graham Plattner, Mr. Kim?
I'm going to ask you about the Senate race in Maine. And the Wall Street Journal and New York Times reporting that last August, Democrat Graham Plattner's wife told his campaign about sexual text messages she had found between her husband and other women early in their marriage, and they were married in 2023. The Times says Plattner exchanged messages with as many as a dozen women, and his campaign said, no, it was up to 6. In a statement, Plattner's wife said she feels betrayed by the ex-campaign aide who revealed the information and that the couple went to counseling. Do you have concerns about Graham Plattner?
Well, first I'll say is, I've been very much focused on the crisis in my home state, so I haven't been able to focus as much on this. But right now, this information's out there with any campaign in the country. The character and the transparency about the different candidates is going to come out. That's part of a campaign. And the voters will decide what it is that they ultimately think in terms of their ability to trust those candidates.
What do you think?
Well, look, right now, for me, I have not met him. I've never talked to him yet.
I want to ask.
Deceit and conformity. Ignore your lying eyes. Shifting out to LA for a minute. Ro Khanna of California asked about the Los Angeles mayor's race and the fact that the Democrats have so ruined California. How is it that we're sitting here with guys like Steve Hilton at the top of the heap for governor. Guys like Spencer Pratt at the top of the heap for the mayor's race. I mean, the polling suggests that Pratt may well pull this thing out. How are we here? Here's Democrat Ro Khanna trying to explain it away.
When it comes to the LA race, Karen Bass and you see Spencer Pratt, what do you think we're learning about how Californians feel about the incumbents in general?
Well, look, I think that there is was a lot of hurt and anger after the fires. My view is that the blame of that really needs to go on Donald Trump. They still owe the state $50 billion. They have not worked with Mayor Bass or our governor to get the resources needed, and they have really punished California. But understandably, people who still haven't seen their homes rebuilt, who were upset with how that was handled, they are upset with the incumbents.
Yeah. And ultimately, there's a little truth nugget there at the end of that clip. Ultimately, they're upset with the incumbents. How about that? A refreshing statement of truth. I don't know that he even meant to say it. Did he hit his head, Ro Khanna? They're upset with the incumbents. Yeah, they ought to be. And he tried his best to somehow make the ruin in Southern California Donald Trump's fault. Nobody believes it. Even he didn't believe it. They're upset with the incumbents. That's exactly right. Democrats' civil war over party chair hangs over their 2028 plans. This from Axios. Democrats are fighting over their strategy and leadership. And do they savage or save the one man with title and power, their DNC chair, Ken Martin? I don't know how much you know about the DNC chair, Ken Martin, but he is about as white bread, like central casting, boring vanilla white guy as they get. You ever seen this guy? I'm amazed that he's actually their party chair, given how radical they are and how much they can't stand white, straight men. I don't know his heritage in terms of his faith, but Ken Martin, I mean, literally right down to his name. Doesn't that sound like some 1950s neighbor? Good morning, Ken. Hello, Bob. Mowing with the old blades, no gas. Ken Martin, white bread. That's the guy that's running the Democrat Party. A Democrat Party, by the way, which we told you last week is in debt, in the red, while the Republicans are sitting on a mountain of cash. Martin is facing a growing crisis of confidence as the DNC's bungled autopsy of 2024 election and its financial struggles are coming to light. So far, Martin has staved off a revolt among DNC members at a time when they're setting the calendar for the 2028 primary. In fact, some of the members of Congress and Democrat strategists are calling for Martin to resign. The DNC's Powerful Rules and Bylaws Committee met at a D.C. hotel last week to hear pitches of a dozen states that want to go to an early upcoming primary. The delicacy of Martin's position was apparent. He skipped the committee's public meeting, though he did quietly visit the hotel for some private conversations. So that, and of course they're panicked. Why? A redistricting battle is set to escalate ahead of 2028 elections. For Americans fed up, writes The Hill, with partisan redistricting, there's bad news on the horizon. The gerrymandering war is heating up. Here again, The Hill, just like the New York Times and others, they're all very concerned about gerrymandering now. They weren't all the years that Illinois and Massachusetts and California have been rigged, but they're very concerned now. Even while the ink is drying on the new House maps on the midterm cycle, the 2028 redistricting battle is taking shape, and it threatens to eclipse the current map-drawing fervor in both its geographic range and its potential to influence which party controls the House in the early years of the next administration. GOP leaders are already moving on plans to draw the 2028 maps in red states across the South, which could include states that just adopted new lines for the midterms. Their campaign has only been fueled by the Supreme Court's recent decision to bar race-based gerrymandering, which is, of course, constitutional and totally correct, to not draw lines based on race. That's not something the Constitution allows for. It's outrageous it ever was used as a justification. Democrats are mad that the Supreme Court said, no, states, you cannot draw only black districts. We don't do that in the United States. While they had fewer opportunities for redistricting ahead of the midterms, Democrats in a host of blue states think their chances are better in the 2028 cycle. Well, maybe, but we also know about the census and the fact that people are fleeing blue states for red states, which gives them more population, which gives them more, what? Representation, of course, in Washington, D.C. So Democrats are staring down the barrel of a mountain of debt. Wild-eyed, gaslighting, lying candidates with Nazi tattoos, and they believe Jesus is transgender or whatever. And on top of that, people are fleeing their states and moving to red states. Of course the Democrats are panicked, and their white-bread loser Democrat Party chairman, they have no faith in him. What a mess they have on their hands. What a mess. And Americans are voting with their feet, writes Fox Business, leaving high-tax blue states for the lowest-cost Republican-led states. As states battle for residents and business, low-tax red states are attracting jobs, investment, and population growth. With affordability set to dominate the 2026 midterms, the migration trend points to continued appeal for Republican-backed economic policies, despite the Democrats' attempts to pin their economic frustrations on Donald Trump. If this trend persists, it could reshape the political landscape, increasing the influence of faster-growing states in both state capitals and Washington. Census Bureau data show the nation's highest tax states are losing residents, while Southern and Sunbelt states continue posting some of the strongest population gains. Again, no surprise. No surprise whatsoever. From the Federalist, a judge has blocked victim restitution from the DOJ after the left complains victims were all conservatives. I kid you not. Remember we talked about the fund that Donald Trump, when he settled, just to take you back, don't mean to bore you with this. I know most of you know the story, but to take you back, Donald Trump suing the government over the release of his tax returns. That is not to happen. The IRS is supposed to safeguard that. Candidates, public people, private, whatever, no one is supposed to have their tax information released. Of course, that was done to Donald Trump. So Donald Trump sued the government, and the Department of Justice recently said, okay, we're going to settle with you on this. We're going to give you $1.776 billion settlement. To which Trump said, thank you very much. I'm going to take that settlement money and I'm going to set it aside in a pot of money, and we're going to use it to pay out victims of government weaponization against them, citizens, like those who've had their homes raided or the FBI surveilling them or wrongly detained during J6. There's been a lot of that. I've certainly covered it on my show over the years, my previous show. Well, a federal judge now, another Democrat, of course, blocked the Trump administration's anti-weaponization restitution fund heading into the weekend after plaintiffs claimed the fund was politically discriminatory because it helped victims of Democrat administrations. Yes, because Democrats are the thugs. Democrats are the ones that use government to punish their political enemies because, as the theme of today's show continues to hammer, the revolution depends on deceit and conformity. If you don't continue to sell the deceit, if you try to shine a light on the deceit, you will be punished. You will conform or be punished. It's what happened when you questioned Ukraine, COVID, the Hunter Biden laptop, on and on, the legitimacy of the 2020 elections, any of that, if you challenged any of that and many other things, I'm sure you could come up with, that men can't be women, that we shouldn't trans our children. If you challenged any of that, you were considered persona non grata. Sometimes your life was ruined. Sometimes you were investigated. Sometimes you were thrown in jail. If you dared show up on January 6th, 2020, just to have your voice heard, to peacefully assemble, to listen to the president speak, former president speak, Donald Trump, you were guilty of something. You had to be. So President Trump has said restitution is owed to some Americans who were abused. And of course, this judge and people fighting the idea say, well, that's not fair because that fund will only be paid out to Republicans and conservatives who were victimized by Democrats. That's the point. Again, the gaslighting is real, folks. It's thick. You need a gas mask. Let's close today on an up note, though. I want to close on an up note, and it comes from none other than street tough Secretary Scott Bessent. He's been one of my favorite in this administration. He's a great communicator, Tough guy. I like it. He's a little nerdy with the number crunching, but yet very, very tall. Never met a fight he backs down from. He's famously gone chest to chest in hallway fights with guys like Elon. F-bombs being thrown. He'll stand up to protesters in a restaurant. Scott Bessent doesn't back down from a fight. I like his moxie. And I also like what he says just about his vision of the country, what Donald Trump's vision of the country is, what they're celebrating, what they're trying to prop up and promote here in 93. Scott Bessent is telling us what the fundamental difference is between this administration and where we've been with Democrats and, frankly, some Republican administrations in the past. Their lack of investment, their lack of belief in this country, and just to trust that now we're a global community and that globally everybody has the same ideals and the same goals and everybody wants to be helpful, and that the United States will just perpetually remain a superpower just because. Well, Bessent makes the point, no, like you can't just go on autopilot. You can't set the country in cruise control and expect us to continue to be exceptional. I love the way he says this, and I think it's a great reminder. After all of this gaslighting, after all of the decades of lies, Trump has come and blown it all up, and he's restructuring things, and he's bringing strength and integrity back to the country, and Bessent says it so well here. Listen.
The truth is that for too long, America had been asleep. We mistook comfort for strength. We substituted efficiency for resilience and consumption as a measure of prosperity. We told ourselves that so long as goods were cheaper overseas, it did not matter whether factories went dark in Michigan, Ohio, or Pennsylvania. We assumed that supply chains would always function smoothly and adversaries would always behave responsibly, and the invisible hand would correct vulnerabilities that too few in public life had the courage to confront. And while we reassured ourselves with those assumptions, risk accumulated all around us. Somewhere along the way, we lost sight of a foundational principle that previous generations understood instinctively. Economic security is national security. For a nation that cannot manufacture, mine, ship, or refine its needs gradually, cedes its strength and sovereignty to others. That is a dangerous dependency for any country. It is an unacceptable one for the United States of America.
Little dose of reality. Again, in a healthy political culture, that kind of honesty, it shouldn't feel revolutionary. The revolution, the destruction of this country depends on deceit and conformity. The Trump administration, people like Scott Bessent, they're telling the truth, difficult truths, uncomfortable truths, but truths this country desperately needs if we are to reverse course and rescue ourselves and stave off the destruction the Democrats have been trying to usher in. And that's going to do it for us today from America's Heartland. Be sure to stay close by subscribing to Heartlander News on YouTube. And we'll have a new show coming up real soon this week. In fact, we'll notify you if you're a subscriber as soon as we publish. So don't miss it. And be sure to give us a like and comment too. I hope that you do. Glad to have you along. And we'll see you next time on Heartlander News.